Hello, friends. Today, I want to discuss a record that every person collecting Social Security should take seriously. It's your Social Security earnings history, which you can find inside your Social Security statement through SSA.gov. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. I've heard about that before. I probably checked it years ago when I was getting ready for retirement. What else is there to know? Don't click away just yet, because there's something important about this document that the Social Security Administration rarely explains in plain language, and most Americans, including many who have been retired for 10 or even 15 years, have never been told. Stay with me until the end, because there is a deadline-related issue connected to this that makes it far more important than most people realize. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the Frank American and turn on notifications. This channel is all about uncovering information hidden inside government systems that can directly affect your finances and your monthly benefits, yet rarely gets explained clearly. Subscribe now, and let's get started. First, let's talk about what this document actually represents. The federal government keeps a lifelong earnings history tied to your Social Security number. Internally, it's known as the Master Earnings File. Every year you worked, beginning with your very first paycheck, employers submitted W-2 information to the IRS, and that information eventually became part of this record. The file tracks your earnings year after year throughout your entire working career. Your Social Security retirement benefit is calculated directly from the information stored in this file, particularly from your 35 highest earning years. The statement you can access online is essentially a summary of that earnings record. Now, here's the question I want you to think about for a moment. If you're already receiving Social Security, and maybe have been receiving it for years, why should you bother reviewing this record today? After all, your benefit has already been calculated. Your payment shows up every month. Everything seems settled. So why look back? The answer is simple. The earnings record is not always accurate. And when there's a mistake, it doesn't just sit there harmlessly. It can reduce your monthly benefit for life. Whether you're still working, recently retired, or have been retired for more than a decade. Consider one real-world example. A retired woman decided to download her Social Security statement simply out of curiosity after being retired for 8 years. As she reviewed her earnings history, she noticed 3 straight years in the late 1990s listed as zero earnings. She immediately knew something was wrong because she had worked full-time at a manufacturing company during those exact years. After looking into it, the explanation became clear. The company had experienced financial problems, mishandled payroll reporting, and eventually shut down. As a result, the wage information never properly reached the Social Security system. When her retirement benefit was originally calculated, those 3 years were treated as though she had earned absolutely nothing. She located her old W-2 forms, submitted them to Social Security, and requested a review. The result was significant. Her monthly benefit increased by roughly $45 for the rest of her life, and she also received a retroactive payment covering the years she had been underpaid. Here's another example. A man spent several years working 2 different jobs. His primary employment was recorded correctly in the system, but all income from his second evening management job was completely missing. Eventually, the reason was discovered. That employer had accidentally reversed 2 digits in his Social Security number when filing wage reports. It was a simple administrative error, but it caused years of earnings to be associated with the wrong record or not credited properly at all. After collecting old tax documents and submitting a correction request, his earnings history was fixed and his benefit amount permanently increased. So what exactly should you be looking for when you review your statement? When you open the earnings section, you'll find a table showing your income year by year. The most important column is usually the one showing your Social Security taxed earnings. Take your time and review every year carefully. If you find a year where you know you were employed but the record shows zero earnings, or if the amount listed is dramatically lower than what you actually earned, that's a red flag worth investigating. Keep in mind that your Social Security benefit is built using your 35 highest earning years. If one of those years contains a 0 when it should contain legitimate wages, your monthly benefit can be lower than it should be for the rest of your life. Now, we come to the part that creates real urgency, and the part many people have never heard before. Federal law generally provides a standard period of 3 years, 3 months, and 15 days from the end of the year in which the wages were earned to make corrections to an earnings record. Once that period expires, Social Security generally assumes its records are correct, and proving an error becomes more difficult because the responsibility falls more heavily on you. However, and this is extremely important, that deadline does not necessarily mean your opportunity is gone. Social Security regulations include several major exceptions. If you possess a W-2 showing the correct wages, or if you filed a tax return reporting the proper amount, Social Security can often correct the record no matter how much time has passed. The same is true when the problem resulted from an employer reporting mistake or a clerical error, which happens to be the cause of many earnings record problems people encounter. The practical reality is straightforward. The sooner you discover and correct an error, the easier the process usually becomes. The longer you wait, the more likely it is that Social Security will request additional supporting documentation. Still, when solid records are available, even decades later, many corrections can be successfully processed. That's exactly why waiting is not a good strategy. Every year that passes increases the chance that old W-2s, payroll records, and tax documents get misplaced, damaged, discarded, or become difficult to read. Reviewing your record now gives you the best opportunity to gather the evidence you need while it's still accessible. So what should you do if you discover a mistake? First, collect as much supporting documentation as possible. The strongest evidence is usually an original W-2 form. If that isn't available, old federal tax returns can also be very useful. If you were self-employed, copies of Form 1040 and related schedules may help establish your earnings history. Even bank records showing regular payroll deposits from an employer can provide supporting evidence. Next, submit Form SSA 7008, which is a request for correction of earnings record. The form is available free of charge through SSA.gov. Identify the years you believe contain errors, attach copies of your supporting documents, and submit the request for review. Social Security is required to evaluate the information you provide. If the agency approves a correction, it updates your master earnings file, recalculates your benefit using the corrected earnings history, and adjusts your monthly payment accordingly going forward. In some cases, correcting an earnings record can also lead to a retroactive payment covering benefits that should have been paid years earlier. But what happens if the company you worked for is no longer around? Maybe it closed its doors, filed for bankruptcy, was sold, or the owner has since passed away. The good news is that you still have ways to prove your earnings. One of the strongest options is to request an official transcript of your past tax records directly from the IRS. This can be done by submitting Form 4506T. An IRS transcript is generally considered highly reliable evidence of income, even if there is no employer left in business to verify your work history. In many situations, that documentation alone can provide the proof needed to support a correction request. If your records have completely disappeared over the years, all hope is not lost. Written statements from former coworkers who can verify that you worked at a particular company during a specific period may help strengthen your case. Additional supporting evidence can also be valuable. Old union membership records, employment agreements, paid documents, company correspondence, or even an employee identification badge may help establish your work history during an administrative review or appeal. There's another important point I want to make, especially for anyone who is still employed or only a few years away from retirement. Do not wait until you apply for Social Security benefits to review your earnings record. Check it now. Then make it a habit to review it every year. If your employer tells you your wages are being reported properly, but you log into SSA.gov and discover that last year's earnings show up as zero, that is something you can address immediately. You can contact your payroll department or human resources office while the company is still operating and while the people responsible for reporting those wages are still available. Solving a reporting error today is usually far easier than trying to reconstruct the same information 10 or 15 years from now after the business has disappeared and records have become difficult to locate. And for those of you who have aging parents or grandparents who may not be comfortable using computers, this is one of the most helpful things you can do for them. Take a few minutes to sit down together. Help them sign into their SSA.gov account and review their earnings history. Compare what appears on the screen with any tax returns, W-2 forms, or employment records they still have available. Discovering even one missing year of earnings could make a meaningful difference in their monthly benefit amount. An additional $50 per month may not sound life-changing to some people, but for someone living on a fixed income, that money can help pay for groceries, prescription medications, utility bills, or other everyday necessities. For many retirees, every dollar matters. So let's bring everything together. Your Social Security benefit is based on the 35 highest earning years recorded in Social Security's files. Those records are incredibly important, but they are not always perfect. Mistakes can remain hidden for years, and sometimes even for decades. Take the time to log into SSA.gov and carefully review your Social Security taxed earnings year by year. Look for years that show zero earnings when you know you were working, or years where the reported amount appears significantly lower than what you actually earned. In general, there's a standard correction period of 3 years, 3 months, and 15 days. However, if you have supporting documentation such as a W-2, tax return, or other credible evidence, corrections can often still be made long after that period has passed. The earlier you identify a problem, the easier it usually is to resolve. If you discover an error, submit Form SSA 7008 along with the documents that support your claim. Social Security will review the evidence and determine whether your earnings record should be updated. And remember, if the company where you work no longer exists, an IRS transcript obtained through Form 4506, T can often provide the proof needed to move the process forward. If you found this information helpful, subscribe to The Frank American. Share this video with someone you know who receives Social Security, and especially send it to retirees who may never have reviewed their earnings record. You could help someone uncover a mistake that has been reducing their benefits for years. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.